Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The United States Supreme Court has struck down the sweeping reciprocal tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, sending shockwaves through Washington and global markets. The decision, announced in a packed courtroom, immediately triggered a flurry of reactions from lawmakers, business leaders, and international partners, all scrambling to assess the fallout. This verdict marks a dramatic check on presidential authority and signals a new era for U.S. trade policy. For the first time in decades, the highest court has drawn a clear line on the limits of executive power in shaping the nation's economic relationships. For years, these tariffs were central to the America First agenda, reshaping supply chains and costing American importers billions. Industries from agriculture to manufacturing felt the impact, as prices rose and global partners retaliated with their own trade barriers. Now, that foundation has been removed, with vast and immediate implications. Companies are left to navigate a new landscape, uncertain about what rules will govern their international business tomorrow. The ruling doesn't just dismantle tariffs, it challenges the legal framework the White House used to justify them. Legal scholars say this could set a precedent for future executive actions, potentially reshaping how presidents wield emergency powers. At its core, can a president unilaterally impose such economic measures under a national emergency? The court's answer: a firm no. The justices emphasized the need for congressional oversight and a return to checks and balances. The decision forces a reckoning within the administration and leaves the world watching for what comes next. Allies and rivals alike are recalibrating their strategies as the U.S. redefines its approach to global commerce. Tonight, we'll break down what this means for the U.S. economy, the future of global commerce, and your wallet. From consumer prices to job markets, the effects will ripple across every sector. We'll explore the history, the legal battle, and the fierce reactions from President Trump and Congress. Expect heated debates, legal appeals, and a political firestorm as both sides dig in. The landscape of American trade has been irrevocably altered, but the battle over America's economic destiny is far from over. The next chapter is just beginning, and its outcome will shape the nation for years to come. To truly grasp the impact of the court's ruling, we need to revisit the origins of these tariffs and the thinking that shaped them. The story begins with a dramatic shift in U.S. trade philosophy, one that would ripple through the global economy. President Trump's reciprocal trade doctrine demanded equal tariffs for equal treatment, a sharp break from decades of multilateral U.S. trade policy. Instead of negotiating broad agreements, the administration focused on direct, country-by-country retaliation, aiming to force trading partners to lower their own barriers. To implement this approach, the administration turned to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, a law originally designed for national security crises, not for trade disputes. This marked a significant expansion of presidential authority. Historically, IEPA targeted rogue regimes, not major trading partners like China, India, or Brazil. Its use in this context was unprecedented and controversial. The administration argued that persistent trade deficits, and even the fentanyl crisis, justified emergency action, framing these economic issues as threats to national security. By 2025, tariffs soared to 50%, on goods from India and Brazil, and a staggering 145% on Chinese products, levels not seen in modern U.S. history. Nearly $90 billion in tariffs were paid by American importers, with these costs often passed down to everyday consumers in the form of higher prices on everything from electronics to clothing. The administration claimed this was a bonanza for America, but economists countered that tariffs are, in reality, a tax on Americans, not foreign exporters. This fundamental disagreement over who truly bears the burden of tariffs set the stage for a dramatic legal showdown at the Supreme Court, with billions of dollars and the future of U.S. trade policy hanging in the balance. The stakes were enormous, not just a question of policy, but a challenge to the very structure of American economic power and the limits of presidential authority. The legal battle reached its climax at the Supreme Court on November 5, 2025. Business groups argued the president had overstepped, using IEEPA to bypass Congress's authority over trade and taxes. The administration's defense tariffs were a necessary response to national security threats. But justices pressed hard, noting the president's public focus on revenue, not security. Justice Gorsuch and others warned that unchecked executive power could erode the separation of powers. The court questioned whether IEEPA could be stretched to justify any economic action under the guise of emergency. Analysts predicted a strong majority against the administration, citing bipartisan concern over executive overreach. The hearing exposed deep contradictions in the government's case, leaving the administration on shaky ground. On Friday, the Supreme Court delivered a decisive blow to the administration's tariff regime. The majority ruled that IEEPA was never meant for broad economic protectionism, but for targeted national security crises. The court found the administration's use of IEEPA to impose global tariffs was an overreach, infringing on Congress's constitutional power. The opinion highlighted the conflict between the president's public statements and the official legal rationale. This ruling reaffirms that the president's power is not unlimited, especially in economic matters reserved for Congress. The decision sets a precedent. Major shifts in trade policy require legislative approval, not just executive action. The Supreme Court has redrawn the boundaries of presidential power in trade. The Supreme Court's decision split Washington along sharply partisan lines, exposing deep divisions not just between political parties, but also within the very institutions that shape American policy. President Trump condemned the ruling as devastating, warning it would leave the U.S. defenseless against unfair trade. He argued that the decision undermines the executive branch's ability to act swiftly in the nation's best interest, especially in a rapidly changing global economy. Meanwhile, congressional leaders who opposed the tariffs celebrated what they called a victory for the Constitution and the rule of law, emphasizing the importance of checks and balances in American democracy. They argued the verdict restores Congress's authority over commerce, not just curbing the president, but reaffirming the legislative branch's vital role in shaping economic policy for the country. The White House, undeterred by the setback, is already preparing a Game 2 plan to reimpose tariffs using other legal tools, signaling that the administration is not backing down from its trade agenda. The fight over trade policy is far from over. It's just moving to new legal and political battlegrounds, with both sides gearing up for further court challenges and legislative maneuvers. Analysts say the ruling is a significant setback for the president's power, but it energizes both sides for the next round, ensuring that the debate will only intensify in the months ahead. The debate over the courts, trade, and executive authority will remain front and center in American politics, shaping the nation's future and testing the resilience of its democratic institutions. The end of IEEPA tariffs brings immediate cost relief for American importers. In theory, lower import costs could mean lower prices for consumers, but it's not guaranteed. Many businesses may use the savings to recover losses or invest, rather than cut prices. Ongoing threats of new tariffs create uncertainty, making companies hesitant to pass on savings. Domestic industries, once shielded by tariffs like steel, now face renewed competition and tough adjustments. Economists say the ruling could help cool inflation, but continued trade uncertainty remains a headwind for growth. The impact on your wallet will depend on how businesses and policymakers respond in the months ahead. The Supreme Court's ruling is a major recalibration of power between the White House and Congress. For years, presidents have expanded executive authority in trade and foreign policy. This decision pushes back, reasserting Congress's primary role in regulating commerce. Lawmakers now have a powerful precedent to challenge future executive overreach. The ruling may force future presidents to be more transparent and consistent in their public and legal justifications. It's a reminder: presidential power is substantial, but not without limits. The decision strengthens Congress and the courts, setting the stage for a more collaborative approach to trade. For critics, it's a triumph of constitutional checks and balances. For supporters, a rallying cry against judicial activism. The debate over trade and executive power is far from settled. The Supreme Court closed one door, but the White House still has options. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 lets the U.S. retaliate against unfair foreign trade practices, no cap on tariffs. The administration has already launched new Section 301 investigations, especially targeting China. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act allows tariffs on national security grounds, with broad executive leeway. Other tools, like Section 122 and the rarely used Section 338, remain in the arsenal, though they carry risks. Experts warn the administration will likely pivot to these authorities, keeping trade tensions high. The Supreme Court's ruling is a setback, but not the end of the trade wars. The legal and economic battles are set to continue. The Supreme Court's decision is a landmark moment, a check on executive power and a reassertion of constitutional order. The ruling dismantles a key pillar of the America First trade policy, but uncertainty remains. The administration is already preparing new legal strategies, so businesses and consumers may only get a temporary reprieve. The core conflict, protectionism versus free trade, remains unresolved. The battleground has shifted, but the stakes are as high as ever. The future of American trade policy and global economic stability hangs in the balance. This is just one chapter in a much larger story. The debate over trade, power, and America's role in the world is far from over.